Welcome to the Amanita podcast with your host, Christian Rasmussen.
Yeah, man. Thank you for the opportunity here. I love your vibe. I love connecting with Gabe, kind of the whole aesthetic you've got going on. And we can get into this shortly, but you and Minnesota Nice are the first people that really turned me on to Amanita after many years of being a little bit apprehensive, kind of some of the stories you shared on my podcast, because even when you talk to about Amanita, they're like, oh, I stay away from that one. I don't know about that one. And I think it's just simply a lack of information and it's turnkey best sourcing, if you will.
Yeah. Do you think that there's any like effort to suppress it? I mean, in the past, maybe like couple hundred years, like, do you look at it like that at all?
I think in general, a lot of plant medicine, if you were to refer to it as that, or fungal medicine, definitely gets the short end of the stick. And I think it's the past 500 years, quite frankly. You know, there's a tradition of use in a lot of different cultures. And for example, I was quoted for a Vice article about Amanita, and they ended up cutting my quote. But in that article, they particularly were interested in why Amanita is outlawed in Louisiana in the United States when it's kind of legal in all these places. And I heard some feedback from someone I asked this question to about, well, it ties into the sort of trying to suppress the local plant medicine traditions, the voodoo, the, quote unquote, witchcraft. And if you look at a lot of West medicine and pharmaceuticals, what people do and what companies do is they'll isolate one single compound from a natural substance and try to market that, right? Rather than this kind of whole comprehensive approach. So I think that's what we're seeing with psilocybin now too. Like if you look at almost all publicity around it, it's always psilocybin. They almost never talk about magic mushrooms or psilocybin mushrooms. It's this kind of push, isolate and patent in many cases. They're not even like actual synthetic or psilocybin extract. It's a synthetic yeast-derived psilocybin. So I think there's a lot of parallels there with Amanita muscaria.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so interesting when you get into like the Rig Veda and the Avestra or whatever the Zoroastrian, book is, and like all of the connections with Christianity and the ancient mushroom cults that really like gave rise to all of the religions that we have in the day, and how prevalent it was in the ancient world. And then it almost has like its own gatekeeper in the sense that it has some, not toxicity, but some level of discomfort if one uses it improperly. It seems like it kind of paved the way in a sense for it to fly under the radar. I also kind of look at it like if somebody wanted something to not be studied or looked at or experienced or used, you label it as being toxic. Like it's the easiest way to get people to just like not pay attention to it at all, which, Amanita is the crown of that, being labeled as a toxic medicine. It's an interesting aspect of the entire Amanita story that's been playing out.
I had no idea that it could be used as a sleep aid. That's been where it's really come in handy for me. I've used cannabis for sleep, but Amanita has been awesome in terms of dreaming. And that's something, for example, with a lot of cannabis use, people use it to sleep, but they often report that they don't dream when they're consuming a lot of cannabis. That's a pretty well-known in there for a lot of people, well-researched and well-publicized, but it's kind of the opposite with Amanita muscaria, where it can help you sleep. And I'm speaking purely from my own experience here, but then also will kick off these really incredible dream states. And that's the thing that I'm very, very interested in. I've always been interested in dreams and other levels of reality beyond our waking consciousness, where we kind of rationalize and reduce everything to this very socially programmed worldview, if you will, right? Like I wake up and have a pretty standard life. I'm married, I have a kid, I try to get to my desk and work. I probably caffeinate more than I should. So, I'm in a way trying to fit into the matrix to the best of my ability. Now that mushrooms are being embraced, it's a lot easier for me that I can do this. But yeah, I'm still super interested in these kind of altered states of consciousness. But one thing as I get older, like doing a full send on a trip is really intriguing, but it has an energetic tax that comes with it. Like, I'll typically sleep in the next day, half the day. Well, when you have a newborn, you can't really do that kind of stuff. So if you can engender these kind of altered states of consciousness through the dream state and still get a full night's rest and wake up and record a podcast at 9 a.m., I'm incredibly in that personally.
For sure. Do you have any like dreams that really stand out that you've had with while working with Amanita?
Yeah, a couple come to mind, right? The first one that comes top of mind is it's happened more than once, but I'll be in a situation that maybe is someone I've had an altercation with or a challenge in my personal and professional life. And I will be literally mediating with them and talking through it. And then I wake up and I realize I can remember this and I just got the playbook for how I'm going to solve this challenge, And
That's
I
awesome.
think that's really advantageous where it's like, that's what I want out of an ally with a plant medicine or mushroom. I want actionable solutions to real world challenges. And like,
Right.
even be the chillest person in the world, you can't help but run into challenges. Like when you're involved in business and like, so many
Yep.
things happen at once. And then it oftentimes gets really difficult where you're like, I don't know how to resolve this situation, or I don't know how to do this or that. And I feel like that's happened more than once where it's sort of been this gift of a conversation. I'm like, wow, that would be a good way to approach this situation. And then lo and behold, you act upon it and you're like, all right, good. We can bury the hatchet on that and move on to more important things.
Yeah. Have you ever tried Silene capensis? Have we sent you any of that?
No, I have not. Never even heard of it.
So that's African dream root, and it's phenomenal when it comes to dreaming. I'm going to send you some today, and yeah, I'm just curious to hear your opinion of it. You just chew a little bit or take a little bit every morning, and then each night the dreams tend to get consecutively more. They're almost more visionary in a sense, and yeah, it's really wonderful medicine. It doesn't alter you at all. You don't notice it at all during the day, but in your dream space, it just like it expands it to an insane degree. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm super into it. Thank you very much. And, you've
Sure.
got so many different interesting, let's say, alkaloid containing plants. I've long been a psychonaut, and I appreciate also people on your team like Gabe being a very proud, outspoken psychonaut. And I've always wanted to access these different states of consciousness, starting with salvia. That was the first thing that kind of came across my
Ah,
radar because it was pretty obtainable. You could just go down to the gas station near the high school and get it.
yeah,
Of
the good
course,
old days.
yeah, those good old days, right? Psilocybin mushrooms have kind of always commanded the most attention for me because probably of the first experiences I had, and always felt a sense of safety and value and clear benefit from more structured use of them. But then there's so many of these other alkaloid containing plants. Like, for example, I've hosted Darren Springer on the podcast. He goes by Darren LeBaron. He spent a lot of time in Africa studying from native traditional healers. And he has been publishing a whole series called Untold Story of Psychedelics in Africa. Also, Mudri Baki, who's one of his co-facilitators, will say they've spent a lot of time over there and talked about in the traditional markets in Africa, all these alkaloid containing plants, where in the West, we don't really know what most of these things are. They have native names. Probably the one you just mentioned is going to be one of them, but they call
Sure.
them like dreaming plants, right? There's like all kinds of them. So, and that's just one part of the world. You look to the Amazon, you look to Asia, every culture has these plants that really help to not just access altered states of consciousness, but improve your baseline state of consciousness. And that's what I'm here for. I'm all about optimizing with plants and building a relationship with nature.
Yeah, I mean that's really what it's all about. Like the experiences are great. Having intense experiences is important and fun, but it's really all about how we can. I mean, we're in this world, It's about how we can bring those experiences and the lessons that we learn into this reality. What's your story? How did you get into your line of work now? And maybe you can expand a little bit on what you do, which is so epic and incredible. But yeah, what's your story, man?
Well, thanks for asking. So I grew up in the south of San Diego in a very cosmopolitan community right on the San Diego-Tijuana border. So from the get-go, I kind of had connections to other ways of living and seeing that not all folks shared the same perspective. A lot of my neighbors were immigrants. And in that upper middle class suburban area I grew up in called Chula Vista, I hosted a lot of foreign exchange students. That was huge for shaping my worldview. And I still have that network. So a lot of the best and brightest minds that were, in some cases, they were earning government scholarships because of their performance in school, or they exhibited leadership characteristics. So I get to build this incredible network, which I fully appreciate now. And at the time, it was just kind of, that's what it was like my life, having a student from Venezuela, one from Ghana, many from former Soviet Union. I was in fourth grade talking to my classmates about my brother from Moldova. They're like, what's Moldova? Or Kyrgyzstan. Oh, he was born in the Soviet Union and the Soviet Empire fell. So like hearing all these perspectives about world lived experiences way outside the canon of like traditional contemporary 90s American experience. So I came of age in the 90s, born in 89. And in high school, I started hearing stories about mushrooms, cannabis, so on and so forth. And they absolutely didn't square with my experience that I had with DARE growing up. You know, I had the whole DARE education. Drugs are bad. Okay. You know, you eat mushrooms, scramble your brain. It was just, you know, it was fear mongered into me that I should avoid these things. And I was a very dedicated athlete. I played Division I baseball, and that was kind of my track growing up. You know, I showed a lot of promise there. Well, I started hearing all these stories from peers that didn't square with this programming I had, especially about natural substances. I started reading books because this was like pre-social media. It was like 2004, 2005 when I started to get interested. And eventually I was like, you guys are really gifted, intelligent, sharp, sociable, and you're telling me that you had an awesome mushroom experience at the beach together. I need to figure out something that's missing here in my education and the programming. So I did some research, went down Arrowhead rabbit holes, as many of us did, discovered Terrence McKenna, had my first low dose mushroom experience, which I'm very grateful for. And I often advocate for go low, start low, go slow. Like you don't know, you don't need to be pushing the envelope with these heroic doses your first time. Like take a half and take a gram, whatever it is. So I had about 1.7 grams of Golden Teacher. And I can remember that entire experience like it was yesterday, Christian. It was this like incredible, insightful, beautiful, uplifting, grounding experience that connected me with three friends, which is another bit I'll mention is that I think in a lot of psychonaut culture, harm reduction traditionally is built in. Like my friends were looking out for me. The people who had the experience, they wanted to make sure everyone was cool. You know, no one's freaking out or anything. So I think that we should really be investing and focusing on this kind of harm reduction, best practices, you know, take a little bit. I've been with friends when they had a challenging experience. It's way easier for a friend to talk you out of that or talk you down than for like a stranger, you know, so you're on your own. So
of course.
And that kind of paved the way for me. This all happened right in the time I was going to college in San Francisco. So, you know, I became a psychonaut before I moved to San Francisco. And then I went to school a stone's throw from Haight Street at University of San Francisco, which is like the mecca of psychedelics, right? And not just experimental psychedelic use, but I started meeting people who were connected with the Grateful Dead. You know, like John Perry Barlow was, you know, one of the songwriters and a neighbor of the school. I started meeting these tech titans, like this guy from the 80s who was an early VR magnate who worked a lot with Timothy Leary, sold a couple companies with VR in the 80s, was working with Autodesk. And it kind of, again, I was like, these super successful people have a relationship with psychedelics where they're applying their insights and experiences to real world applications. And not only are they creating something beautiful for the world, they're also kind of designing this epic life that they're leading. And that set me off on a path that I'm still on today. Got a degree in media studies because I kind of saw that this is where ideas are shaped. You know, I saw all the different applications I could apply a well-grounded, well-structured background in media to. And I think it was a good decision because now you see like social media has taken off. Like when I first enrolled and was kind of studying all this, YouTube was brand new. Twitter launched in 2006. Facebook launched 2006 or 7. So I was on that first wave of people really starting to create, you know, had a YouTube channel or was involved with one back in 2007. And I saw that as the future. And then, especially when the pandemic hit, everything went online and people with multimedia skills, people who could curate an experience, right? And I feel like a lot of people were reluctantly forced to become savvy at online communication and digital media, but that's sort of my wheelhouse. And then when the psychedelic conversation took off, I was like, I've been training for this for decades. Like this is exactly my wheelhouse. So that's sort of in a nutshell how I got to where I am with Mycopreneur. And I'll briefly mention Mycopreneur is a podcast, started as a podcast, grew into a full-on platform that primarily intends to platform and connect mushroom entrepreneurs around the world. And it's been very successful at doing that. And I just love doing it. I love these conversations. I love talking about mushrooms. I love talking about Amanita mushrooms as well now.
And you're a comedian. You're hilarious. And you're starting to blow up, it seems like.
Dude, thank you very much. Yeah. I've gotten a lot of cool opportunities lately. And just this week, I just booked like 4 shows in Denver for MAPS. And incredibly pumped. I got invited to MC the 100th birthday party of Sasha Shulgin. And that
Oh my
has
God.
all these heavy hitters like Paul Stamets is involved, Alex Gray, Rick Doblin. And it's those kinds of opportunities where I just have to kind of step back a little bit and say, I better write some good jokes. I better take this. I've got another show at Meow Wolf coming up. That's one that I just
amazing.
got to do with some of my favorite comedians, Dylan.
Duncan Trussell was there.
Russell, Reggie Watts.
Reggie Watts, yeah.
It's cool to like connect with these people as peers a little bit. Like I was in the green room with Duncan Trussell showing him like this text exchange we had and just chatting. And I showed him my routine for the night. Like, this is how I'm going to approach it. He's like, oh, that's how Louis C.K. does it. And it was one of those pinch me moments. Like, it's like not even like I'm talking to one of my kind of heroes here. It's like, oh, you're talking to a peer. So yeah, man, thank you very much. And I've been doing a lot of comedy and I've got a show in Miami next week. I'm doing one and got a bunch more coming up. And best believe I'll be rolling with the Minnesota Nice Ethnobotanicals, singing the praises of one of my favorite companies in the space right now.
Thank you, man. We appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. We've been working with Duncan as well recently.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, which is really exciting. It's for us as well. It's like, it's a pinch me situation. He's what a great, I haven't spoken with him, but Gabe and him have gotten really close, and it just sounds like just such an incredible human being. And yeah, very, very well connected and hilarious and such an interesting perspective on the world and psychedelics. Yeah, very cool guy.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need for this next chapter of, let's call it mainstreaming of plant medicines, where they're kind of coming off of the fringes. And like just last week, there were a lot of headlines made because Casey Means was nominated for the Surgeon General position, which is the top doctor, kind of the medical authority in the United States. And she was drawing criticism for this, but actually the praise far outweighed the criticism, that she's talked about her mushroom experiences. She's talked about communing with a tree while on mushrooms. She's talking about mushrooms helped her find love. And like to the kind of old guard establishment, this gets written off as woo-woo in the same way we talked about with Amanita or plant medicine. It's like, this is not FDA approved. This is illegal. And then you start to think, well, I guess it predates a lot of that. Like, so it's really nice that people are in positions of influence are able to share these experiences, because it just emboldens more people to share their experiences. And that's where I think comedians, actors, artists, etc., are going to play such a crucial role in regulating and stabilizing this current movement. It's been really camped in the medical research side of things, and I think there's huge value to that. But ultimately, for myself, for probably a lot of people in your camp, it's these artists. It's me finding that one of my favorite artists has a relationship with mushrooms, or like Bjork uses LSD for creativity, or John Lennon talks about his LSD. It's like that to me is what puts it in the wheelhouse and makes it relatable, less so pretty obscure research where they're like, oh, the 5-H2A receptor acts. I think that's really cool. But for the average person who's accessing these, it's going to be people like Duncan Trussell and hopefully myself who can help.
Yeah, 100%. So like, where do you envision it all going? And where do you envision the Mycopreneur platform? What's the mission, I suppose?
Well, I can't even imagine when I think about it now, like how it took off in the last few years, because when I first started publishing podcasts, it was very much a pandemic project and I didn't really have a long-term goal. And then within 2 years, I started to get invited to MC these events. I was at the New York Academy of Medicine all of a sudden. And then all of a sudden I'm at, in London and doing these incredible opportunities. Like I mentioned, I've got a few more in the pipeline. So really, it's just been a question, which I'm sure you're familiar with, of like keeping the momentum going and figuring out like how to kind of streamline and optimize these many different opportunities. Like you're spinning plates, like I did a podcast I published this morning. I've got a newborn. I have to wake up at like 5:30, 5 a.m. so I can, wake up before him to get a few hours in. After this, I'll take him, my wife's got him right now. But where I really see it going lately, I've been thinking deeply about this, and thanks to some of the good rest I have, I can think more clearly. It's to really curate and platform and uplift other emerging mushroom entrepreneurs, activists, advocates, and more people have been reaching out to contribute to the Mycopreneur platform. And I love that because now I see my job sort of as a curator. Like this person is a graduate student, they're getting their PhD in ectomycorrhizal fungi. I have a close collaborator and I've hired him thanks to the support that companies like you and Real Mushrooms and MicroBoost have invested in the platform. I can now turn around and hire another person who's really brilliant. And like the first article that this guy wrote, the co-founder of MycoWorks, which is one of the biggest mushroom companies in the world, $700 million valuation. They're doing mushroom leather. He read it, reached out and was like, this person is really onto something with this whole theme that he's on. I want to meet him. And it's those kind of things where you're like, this is so cool that like, I want to put people in the right position and build a platform for them. So that's where I see Mycopreneur going. I want to keep doing the comedy, MC, all that stuff. But on the back end of that, I want to have really legitimate scientific research, really legitimate perspectives from up and coming, people like Chrysanthemum, who I just had on the podcast. Yeah. And then kind of just be a editor / curator / Rupert Murdoch with a trippy twist.
I love that. What's the Maps? What are you doing at Maps?
Yeah, man. So I've got a panel. This will be my second time at their incredible conference called Psychedelic Fatherhood that I was invited to be on to talk about how psychedelics have influenced or informed my experience as a father, which is very new. I've been a psychonaut for 20 years. I've been a father for under 5 months, but nevertheless, there's a lot of experiences you can draw from those types of eye-opening, mind-expanding psychedelic experiences that can be applied to parenthood. A lot of people think, myself included. So I'm doing that, but then I got tapped for after parties every night. So I'm going to open at Cervantes Masterpiece Theater with Tandava Retreats. They're a 5-MeO DMT retreat center based in Tepoztlan, Mexico. I got to do this show with them last time too, and they packed the house. They had 600 people there in a really cool venue, a lot of scientists, a lot of researchers, and that's with two awesome artists. One, Savage, who's very popular. And then I think the other guy's name is like Porkiri. And I haven't met him yet, but a lot of people have reached out and be like, he's awesome. This is cool. You're sharing a bill with him. So I'm going to kick off there on June 17th. That same night, I'm doing the Psychedelic Playhouse. I'm going to MC. And no, that night is the Shulgin birthday. So that's the 17th. Anyone who's going to be in Denver who's interested in psychedelics should come meet the Shulgin family and the foundation.
Yeah, that would be incredible. I wish I could. I was going to go to Maps and I was invited to present, but I have a family reunion that week, so I can't, which is one of the things that I have to do, like gotta keep the family going. But next year I plan on going and being a part of it. So yeah, I'd love to connect. So we were in Austin together at the same party. This still trips me out. We're at the same party and we didn't cross paths somehow. That was pretty funny.
Well, everyone's dressed up, and the thing about South by Southwest and these events is it's a marathon. So like, I'm waking up 8 a.m., 9 a.m. I cannot sleep in these days. I'm still wired with I'm up early, and then had a panel that day, and then you're at another party, and then you're at a lunch. And, I live in a fairly remote area. So when I go to events, I'm going all out to see everyone I can. But yeah, that was a cool party. Shout out ACT3. I even saw a table with some Blue Lotus. For all I know, that was you guys. And I just was like, oh, cool, Blue Lotus.
That's a client of ours. Yeah. Ryan. Yeah. Well, he's a partial client. We'll say some of that wasn't ours, but some of it was. Yeah. Ryan's a really cool guy. He's a unique individual, but yeah, that was fun. It was the first time I'd ever been to South by Southwest, and it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun.
Sweet. I've been the last 3 years. I'll probably go next year, but we'll see. I mean, all of these events, people say, is it worth it? It's like, if you make it worth it, it's worth it. Go strike up 100 conversations a day. I've every single event I've gone to, I've come away with new friends, and I don't go into this networking trying to like be a professional client gatherer. That's not how I do any of this. It's like, I want to vibe, see who I vibe with, connect. And then over time, opportunities emerge. And, that's really my approach.
That's what it's all about. Absolutely. And I mean, the quality of the opportunities that emerge are so much better when you're not looking for the opportunities, you're looking for real, genuine connection. And so it becomes a byproduct of what you're really looking for. And I enjoy that a lot too. Let's give you some practice on the fatherhood panel. What's your experience with psychedelics and fatherhood?
Well, man, so I call them my little microdose. I feel like I got to pep up the step with a little comedy here. I've got some bits we can jump into later, but
please.
It was an amazing experience. in that when I found out I was going to be a dad, my wife and I had started discussing, like, I guess it's probably time, if we're going to have a kid, it's a good time to do it now. You know, we're both in our mid 30s. I was surprised how quick it happened. That was the first thing. I was like, holy shit. Like, I was expecting it to take a while. I was like, oh, that was immediate. But when she told me, I was actually at this incredible group. I don't want to call it a retreat. It was like a colloquium of sorts. I got invited to in Sayulita, Mexico. It was this beautiful 5-story house right on the beach. And there were all these incredible psychonauts there, like Jonathan Ott, who's a legend. I've been, reading his work for over a decade at least. And he's there, and very reclusive fellow. Zach Leary, I get to form a friendship that's been blossoming with Zach Leary, who hosted the MAPS podcast. And he was born into a legacy of psychedelic use, just wrote a book, shout out Your Extraordinary Mind. Anyways, I had this incredible experience with this group for a week on the beach in Sayulita. And then the last day, I jokingly asked my wife on FaceTime, I was like, so are you pregnant yet? And she nods at me. I wasn't going to tell you on the phone. I was going to wait till you got home, but I couldn't lie. And I was like, holy shit. It just felt like there are no accidents there. The incredible experience I find out on the last day. And then true story, right after I found out, I went to a lunch with a professor from NYU who was one of the members of this colloquium. And I'm sitting there and he goes, holy shit, look at the sun. And there's a ring around the sun. It was like this solar vortex flare that I Googled later. They're incredibly rare. They happen very infrequently. And it was just like, what are the odds that the day I find out I'm going to be a dad, there's this celestial event that happens that I've only seen once before in life. Like back when I was a kid, I remember seeing it. So that's kind of how I found out. And then real interesting experience having the kid, like the actual birth process. Winston is his name, Winston Henry Walker. And we were going to do a home birth, and we had midwives. We had the pool, it was a water birth. And then my wife was in labor for 3 days. It was like the most brute, painful, process where it didn't go at all to you think we're going to have a nice, chill, hippie home birth. And it's 3 days in, you haven't slept a week. Literally between contractions, I would try to sleep and fall asleep into a deep sleep for 5 minutes and then be woken up with screaming and have to go support. So eventually she's like, we got to go to the hospital. This wasn't the plan, but we got to do it. Now I live most of the year in Mexico. So that was its own challenge. We weren't planning on this. I've never really been to a hospital in Mexico. It was awesome. They had 8 medical professionals there. It was 2 a.m. Christmas night. So technically the 26th, but all these people were there on Christmas. Private hospital, had just the best treatment, the best care, everything, her family, I'm calling them, everything's good. And we walk out of there and we didn't have insurance. So the whole time I'm just I don't know what this is going to cost. We walk out, it's $1,200 out the door. So I got to just give a huge shout out to the Mexican medical system. I had a great experience. Winston comes home and the hardest part has been getting invited to stuff and being away. Because for instance, you got to do 3 shows and I said yes to this before we had the kids. So you're not thinking about all the ramifications of what it's actually like to have the baby. I got to MC and host the Texas Mushroom Conference, huge venue, 1,000 or so people. I don't know. It was packed. Of course I was going to say yes to that. I did a stand-up comedy show the night before that sold out. That was in Austin next to the mothership, downtown 6th Street, primo venue, professional comedians. And then I had the Meow Wolf gig the next week. So all of that, but it required me to be away from the family. I was like, why don't you come with me and bring Winston? She's like, it's just too much. The flights and the this and the that. So I was away for 12 days. And then I learned that's really, really tough, so I have had to kind of down schedule. Now they'll be with me out in Denver, which is cool. And I mean, I could go on and on about it, but I'll say that it's incredibly humbling. First of all, it's it doesn't matter what you got going on in your life. This kid is the priority right now. You got to change the diaper, got to figure out a way to make them stop crying because they've been agitated. And that's just part of the development process. You become kind of a homebody, it's all right, hey, people want to go out. You want to go out, meet for beers at 9:30 p.m. It's can you do 2:30 p.m.? Maybe that'll work. So it's a learning curve, but I mean, I can't say enough good things about the experience, tiring at times as it can be.
Yeah. How do you think it'll shape your psychedelic use? How do you think that'll shape your parenting as he gets older?
Such a good question, man. I mean, I've asked some of the psychonauts who are friends of mine this question, about multi-generational, especially with sort of outward kind of public figure, if you will. advocating for psychedelics. And for example, I've talked to Zach Leary about this. His dad's Tim Leary, and he's like, he didn't push them on me. He at no point did he like push these on me. In fact, it was the opposite. It was like, so I have this sense of reverence to be like, I'm increasingly trying to emphasize the considerations people should apply to the fact that they use psychedelics. Because I think with the whole wave recently and all the media hype, there have been a lot of people who have kind of jumped full steam into using psychedelics. I think there's a lot of benefit there, but it's important to kind of like sober yourself to a degree. I've gone extended periods of time, like 6 months at a time without using any psychedelics, because I think that's generally a good idea, and be like, reevaluate. Otherwise, it's pretty easy to be like, I'm going to do a ceremony every weekend. And like, whenever I have a problem, I'm going to go do, it's like, I don't think that's the best way. So, the way that I think about it is, again, like I mentioned, like shout out to the Amanita. I want some deep sleep. I want some dreams, because I got to be up at 8 a.m. or whatever. I can't be taking the next day off because I'm sleeping in until 1 p.m. because I've been up all night until the birds are chirping or whatever.
Yeah.
Now that said, I think that it still has a huge place, so I fully intend to do another macrodose at some point in the near future. I haven't done one in a while, but I want to do it at a point where it's like, we're well appointed. I take the next day off. I'm not shirking responsibilities as a father. So, I'm learning with it. But then the other last piece there I'll mention is a network of other people, like having other fathers, which is starting to emerge now, and people sharing their experiences about like, the other 3 guys on my panel, I think all of their kids are teenagers or adults. So like, I have some brains to pick, be like, well, how would you manage this situation? I think, with any business, with a family, you should have advisors. You should have people you can turn to who are more experienced, who can tell you, well, I wouldn't do that. Well, here's what I did. And that just really helps. Have a community of them. That's what I'm working on building right now.
Yeah. Lovely. Love it. How did you find Amanita? How did that happen? What's that inception story?
Yeah, dude. So I would forage it first. Of course I read about it. I would forage it, but I wouldn't consume it. I even went so far as to dry some on my windowsill with the intent to consume. But again, I just found such like a hodgepodge of information. And for example, I have a friend who is very well known in the mushroom world and has a mushroom company, and he likes Amanita, but he told me one time he ate too much and it was just a really overwhelming experience. And this is coming from a psychonaut, right? You hear those experiences, and I know myself well enough to know, when I got into all the psilocybin mushrooms and other things, I was pretty young. So I would maybe occasionally be a bit reckless, right? And now I know like, okay, well, I want to be able to be a little bit more pragmatic and integrate this into my life. So I hadn't taken those mushrooms when I wild foraged them. I did eat them because I work with a group of mycologists. And when I say eat them and not trip, is because they parboil them. They remove the skin. So they eat them just like any other wild forage mushrooms, not with any of the muscimol or ibotenic acid, as far as I understand. So I had experience eating them, but again, like
how were they? How were they when I've never eaten them. I'm curious.
I mean, they are meaty, they are delicious, and typically we would be doing these gastronomical events, which actually the guy who leads that organization, Fungaria, is who I was mentioning, who contributes to Mycopreneur now. And he's a master's degree in ectomycorrhizal mycology, like a true mycologist and practicing. So we would do these gastronomy events where we go foraging, pick a bunch of different mushrooms, and then make dishes with them, like really high quality hot cuisine. So I don't think I ever ate like an Amanita by itself. It was always like part of a stew, right? Like baked into a cookie, which we had Amanita cookies. So
interesting. Yeah, that's a cool concept.
Mushrooms as a dessert is definitely, I think, a sleeper banger. There's a lot you can do, like truffles, mushroom cookies. I see you've got the Amanita chocolate, which I'm very on board with getting my hands on soon. I'll rep that till the cows come home. We might have to talk about this after too. So, but yeah,
just let me know what you want. We'll send you whatever. Yeah.
Well, I'm very much in for that. I've got a chocolate project I've been working on for a while called Myco Day here. And we ordered 1,000 bars. This is functional mushrooms at mycoday.com. It's been a challenge because we had the mushrooms grown in Finland from a company that are friends of mine. Then the chocolate was made in Lithuania by an artisanal award-winning chocolatier who we had a connection to. And then when the tariffs hit, we got screwed a little bit at the border because customs seized like 700 bars. And instead of paying whatever, at the end of the day, it was kind of a trivial loss. It wasn't like I invested tens of thousands of dollars in this. But anyways, while we're actively, looking to switch our whole chocolate operation domestically for obvious reasons because of an experience like that. And it
Yeah.
wasn't just a tariff them. They held on to the bars for like months where,
Yeah.
there was in a customs warehouse getting shipped around. And fortunately, our chocolatier swapped him out because he understood it was beyond our control. So we have good chocolate now, of course, not stuff that's been sitting in the warehouse. But really what it comes down to, Christian, with discovering Amanita is just like you've said, like so much of the content online was people sharing their bad experiences or like these products that were not Amanita. They're synthetic, they're research chemicals, the whole diamond shrooms thing.
Yeah.
I've had people at conferences, tons of people hand me Amanita products. And my whole like operating procedure is like, if I don't know someone personally, I'm not going to give a lot of trust to this random product that a random person hands me who's trying to show these things. So once I found out, I've been following Gabe for a while, he hit me up, appreciating his content. Once you hit me up, it was really the samples you sent me at South by Southwest that I was sharing with people. I remember the first time I was just like, I got to be up tomorrow, but I'm going to try like a few of these. Slept really well. I'm sure I'm not just trying to flatter you. Like I'm actively using Amanita for sleep. And now, I'm trying to share it with people because a lot of people are interested in them. And a lot of people also are like, I never tried it. I don't know. It's never really been a thing I felt like I was ready to do. So yeah, kudos.
It's a much gentler substance than a lot of people imagine it to be. As long as, proper dosing and preparation and everything is so important, it's generally much more benign than people tend to think. As long, you can't be going and like eating, 20 grams of raw caps out of the ground, like you're going to have a really bad experience. But yeah, when you're dosing it right, it's really lovely. Do you take it consistently for sleep? Like, is it a daily thing for you or?
So I took 2 gummies last night, and I think these ones, got them right here. Look at that. See, now I have it.
I noticed.
So, these ones are the 350 milligram extracts, and I just took 2 of these. So 700 milligrams. It worked out, and I did have a super nice dream last night. So I'll spare you the details on that one, but let's say that it was a nice intimate dream with good.
That sounds good.
That's
I was about to say I don't want to be spared the details, but nice intimate dream. We can scratch that one.
It's a good one. Yeah, it was memorable. I woke up with a smile on my face. Let's say.
Good.
So when I had those capsules you had sent me, I was sharing them with people I knew. People in the mushroom community who already were familiar with Amanita. I'm just like, hey, try these, and so that was a nice routine. And do I take them routinely? I would like to. I think I've taken them, on an as needed basis, which typically is like, I got to sleep well tonight. I'm going to do this. So, but what's your take on that? I'm curious. Like, people think about tolerance, or are you taking too much? Like, is this something that you integrate into your nightly or daily routine on a weekly basis, weekly basis?
I used to use it a lot. I mean, I started getting off of benzos, and like in that situation, it was really important for me to take it very consistently. So I took it consistently, and I experimented a lot with larger doses, which I think has a really, really important place in the whole experience as well, but not for the faint of heart. And you need to be very ready for it. The intensity of the experience for a very large dose is on par with something like DMT or ayahuasca. It's just a completely different experience, and maybe not. They're almost like polar opposite experiences, but the level of distortion of reality in a sense is very intense. But yeah, so nowadays, I mean, there have been times where I've taken it very consistently daily in microdoses to large doses. There have been times where I've just used it for sleep. Nowadays, I tend to utilize it in sync with moon cycles for some reason, and I take very large doses. So I'm going for as much knowledge as I can get, basically. It's so fluid with me, like it changes consistently. That's where I'm settled at right now. We'll see where it goes. I never really noticed any tolerance or any rebound or anything like that until there was a period from like last September to December where I was using it very heavily. And I noticed that it started not working as well if I would use it heavily for a handful of days in a row, and then a couple of days off completely resets that for me. That tolerance wasn't the case a couple years ago. It's almost like over time, and it almost seems to be like a self-limiting mechanism where my body's like, okay, you've gotten what you need, you don't need to do this anymore, so like it's just not going to be as effective. And I think the mushroom's really intuitive, and the body and the interplay between the mushroom and the body, it's a very intuitive process. But yeah, nowadays I do very large doses every couple weeks, maybe every month. Currently, that's giving me the most benefit. Sometimes my ego would like to be taking it more, but if I tune in, it's like, no, you really don't need it. There was a period in time where it was so beneficial for me to take it very consistently. But now I just don't need it at this point in my life. I really glean a lot from the large dose experience, and it's sort of evolved over time. And it's almost like a story that plays out. Like I go to the same place, and it's so hard to put into words, and I'm starting to be able to pull back a lot more information from it. But I go to the same space in a sense and have a very similar experience, but each time I go a little bit further and I learn a little bit more. So it's this beautiful cosmic joke story that really connects me to the divine and the all and the singularity and my role in everything that's been playing out. And then that has largely influenced my day-to-day life and how I interact with this world and how I see like what I'm doing and where I'm meant to be going or where I am going. And maybe there's disharmony in that. I mean, Amanita and DMT have really like had such a profound role in shaping my life. And DMT was prior to Amanita for 5 years or so. I really, really like, explored those realms and saw what they had to offer me. And I haven't done DMT in a couple years at this point, but I feel like it's time to start going back to that here soon. But yeah, Amanita and DMT have both like really, really shaped my life and who I am and this mission that I'm on. Cause it feels like, and I'm sure you feel this too. It's like, it's not a business. It's not what we'd like to be doing. And those things are absolutely true, but it's like a spiritual mission that we're on. It feels like, like it's like, and I would imagine you feel the same. Like we have a duty, like it's like maybe not a karmic debt, but like a karmic obligation that we have to do what we're doing and spread the knowledge or the products or the information and build the communities and kind of help bring humanity back to roots while also like extending to something higher that we haven't achieved before as a species.
I'm fully on board with what you just outlined, especially in terms of exploring these inner dimensions, this rich inner life and these altered states that exist within you, I think hold so many possibilities to solving this polycrisis that we have. And I got to host an event yesterday with some incredible people involved. It was online, and Dr. Bruce Dahmer, who is the founder of Center for Minds and a former he's an astrophysicist, very well known. He was just on Duncan's podcast, actually. And he was talking about the polycrisis, which I brought up earlier. And I realized like there's a lot of people thinking about the world in this term right now, and that we have so many distractions, chaos, so much noise, so many challenges on the outside. And somehow a lot of the answers to those things are actually inside of us, and being able
100%.
to, I think about, like you say, the powers that be. There definitely has been a agenda, right, for years to try to suppress a lot of this natural knowledge or knowledge of the self, and to have people look for solutions outside of yourself as often as possible. And, you're addicted to scrolling. Many people I taught multimedia for 2 years in high school. I saw kids, I didn't have a smartphone in high school, getting addicted to the scroll, and just like the dopamine gets depleted. Like these social media platforms, as much as I use them, they're built like slot machines. They're literally designed to keep you addicted, and you think about, this is another angle I talk about a lot. Like you can hardly promote these things on social media. You get deplatformed, you get censored. Pfizer can have free reign over NFL commercials and so on and so forth. But if somebody dares talk about their psilocybin mushroom experience that, helped them break a dependency, or their Amanita experience, they're subject to censorship oftentimes. So, people get really creative in how they navigate that. But again, at the end of the day, it's like, the more you look inside yourself, a lot of time the answers become really shockingly simple and clear. Kind of like I alluded to with having these dreams where I'm actively navigating, having a conversation with someone I've had a challenge with. And all of a sudden I'm like, I just was gifted from some mysterious realm that I don't know where it came from. I have the exact phrase or like how I can start, or like, I've been able to very clearly reduce this complex challenge and scenario to very simple actionable steps. I find that a lot with mushrooms. I always have. And I fully believe they are a sentient intelligence. Sometimes that perspective gets some flack, in the academic community, but increasingly so, it's really difficult to explain these realms and where this knowledge comes from, especially when it's really insightful or really rich and colorful and can actually help you. I had two phrases that were directly gifted to me by mushrooms one time that I still use. I was having a hard time. I was 20 years old, just gone through a breakup, had my band I was in fell apart, and like, woe is me, poor 20-year-old college student. I was always trying to get it. I've never been one who could just sit and twiddle my thumbs. I've always been trying to get it. So when you try to get it, especially when you're young, you run into challenges. If you're running a business and you're not running into challenges or a project, it's probably not a business or project of much consequence. You run into friction. So I had these two phrases that the mushrooms gave me when I was struggling. One, it was create answers, not expectations. And I feel that way still, to be like, don't worry about your expectations, your projections. You're bound to be let down. If you're expecting that something's going to happen, just go put your head down and create something today, create an answer that speaks for itself, So, and I still grapple with that, to be like, I'm living too much in the future. How am I going to manage this thing that's coming up on the horizon? It's like, you manage it by crushing today, by getting it, write some new jokes today, man, produce a podcast, call your friend today. So create answers, not expectations. The other one, which is kind of cheeky, is lose the loser attitude. That's what it told me. And I was like, re-identify, instead of being like, moping me, this person did this, or that person's doing this. It's like, just lose that loser attitude. And I just thought it was funny that these two pithy, very succinct phrases just come to my head, or two succinct phrases that I can use now, even 15 years later. I can still navigate with that. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. Another example, when Mycopreneur really started to get a lot of opportunities, I started to get press interviews and, do you want to come do this in Denver? Or, I went out to Amsterdam for a thing, and I'm trying to balance all these cool opportunities. It became a bit much to a point where it still feels like this sometimes, where it's like, I'm just running a business. I'm doing spreadsheets and, scheduling calls. It's like, this is kind of taking me out of the center of gravity, where I feel really at home on stage. I feel really at home on the mic. I don't feel at home answering emails on time. I don't feel at home in spreadsheets, right? And so I had this sense where I went and did a macro dose of psilocybin mushrooms. And the takeaway from that was you need to just connect with other mushroom entrepreneurs genuinely. You don't need to be thinking about how you're going to do a tit for tat with this PR person, and then they're going to do this, and your whole strategy. Just go back to the roots, which is to connect with other people who have had profound experiences, who are running mushroom businesses, and just platform them and build that. And I'm coming back to that right now, because sometimes I get hung up on my views are down this month. I said a word the algorithm didn't like, or maybe it's just a bad piece of content that sucked. It happens. And then all of a sudden, you're marketing yourself in these opportunities, be like, I'm getting 1 million views a month. And now, I got 225,000 views. I'm like, that's really not what I got in this for. And you have to be reminded of that sometimes. Be like, that doesn't conflate with your self-worth or whatever. So I'm thinking maybe I need to do less of me, and more of build up these other people. There's so many people who want a platform, who deserve an opportunity to have their perspectives represented. Curate that. And so that's what I did yesterday. I just published a piece of writing from a graduate student at University of Arkansas, Little Rock, about soil biology and using spent mushroom blocks or spent mushroom substrate to revitalize soil. And, it did really well. People shared it. Tons of people reached out. Then somebody else was like, hey, can I write something for Mycopreneur? So I'm like, this is way more where I want to be at right now. Not just trying to battle this algorithm for how I'm going to get the most views, how I'm going to in the long run, keep building, keep moving forward, 2 steps forward, half a step back. That's how the whole keep experience carries forward for my money.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I've had to battle with a lot as well, or try and figure out and integrate. Things flow so much better when I'm not trying to make things happen, just allowing things to flow and building real connections and allowing the love exchange to happen. Things just tend to work out infinitely better. And it's a much it's a much more relaxing way to live as well. It's a much more peaceful and happy way to live, which is nice. Yeah, thanks, man. I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm a little tired, but I'm chilling, man. Yeah, no, and I'm really enjoying talking to you. I'm curious, what's like some of the coolest stuff that you're seeing right now in the mushroom realm and community? I know you're really tapped into a lot of people that are doing great things. What's some of the coolest new exciting stuff that's popping up?
There's so much going on right now. And in particular, I love a lot of the applications for mushrooms that are kind of beyond just taking mushrooms or consuming them. Like, for example, I had this dude, Andy Cartier, on the podcast from Studio Cartier in the Netherlands. They just commercially released the world's first Mycelium surfboard. They made a surfboard out of Mycelium materials, essentially, and it's sold through a French outdoor retailer. That's incredibly cool. And that same design firm was involved with building prototype refugee houses out of mycelium for refugees, specifically in Gaza. And again, like you just see, we have these problems in the world. You have refugees, they're all over the planet. You have refugees in Bangladesh, in Syria, in Gaza, and sub-Saharan Africa. And they're strapped for resources in a lot of these regions. And then you have mushroom entrepreneurs coming in saying, well, actually, we can scaffold a shelter by growing it, basically. It's low cost. It can use local materials. They use palm waste. And they were a standout exhibition at Dubai Design Week. That's a huge week and a region with tons of money. They're putting a good look forward for mushroom entrepreneurs. So that's one example. Like mycelium surfboards, of course, that sounds amazing. Right? And like, for example, someone in Oklahoma, I went to the Oklahoma Mushroom Conference, just walked up and handed me a Rishi paintbrush. This is so cool. Like,
that's awesome.
Rishi antler that they made into a paintbrush. And you can make paint out of mushrooms. There's mushroom pigment. Sure. There's like a Lactarius, a couple of different things. Like, I'm trying to get some mushroom paint, use a Rishi paintbrush, and create some mushroom art just for my own purposes. I think that sounds great. Tons of other things, man. Any other specific things you want to know about?
Oh, I'm just curious about what's popping up. I don't have time to get connected into all that and the mushroom community. As much as I'd love to be more involved with the mushroom community right now in my life, it's just, I'm swamped constantly. And yeah, so I'm just curious as to like what's happening and what's the growing of houses is fascinating, or growing of structures via mycelium. That's fascinating.
There's so much going on there. Like, NASA has invested in this technology too, because the theory is, which has been done and shown on the earth. Like, for example, in Namibia, there's a company called Mycohab. They're making tiny houses that are grown out of mycelium. It's a great substance, like Rishi leather is another example. Like, it is a really high quality material. Like, Cadillac and Hermes have both collaborated with MycoWorks. So I mentioned Phil Ross has been on my podcast, and we're collaborating on a forthcoming project involving one of the contributors to Mycopreneur. But like, these are examples of people doing this at scale with big companies. When you start to see IKEA, Dell Corporation, NASA, the US DOD investing in mushrooms. So like, there's something real going on here. So those are a couple of interesting things. Now, with analytical potency testing, in specific for psilocybin and increasingly for Amanita, though that's very new, that's really taking off because there's so many products now. Like, yes, in most of the country, mushrooms are technically illegal, but there's a lot of decriminalized zones. There's a lot of people who just say, I'm going to use this regardless of what the law says because I need this / this is something that I want personally to do. Like, tons of people. I mean, people involved in policy speak out of both sides of their mouth because, like, I know people, involved in DC in policy who are actively consuming these things, right? So it's like, the laws are changing and there's a glacial pace there with policy and so on. But a lot of these places have decriminalized. So there's clearly a huge legacy market for these products, as many people are familiar. And the missing piece there, like with the, diamond shrooms piece, if you saw that made a lot of headlines about so on and so forth, is the analytical potency testing, to have a lab of professional chemists who have HPLC, and they can tell you what you're looking at, and they can say, we tested this product, and there have been articles on this. Like, one got published in SFGate. I think there have been a few other, but that one comes to mind, where some colleagues and friends of mine from Hyphae Labs, shout out Hyphae Labs, Tomas and Reggie, they've tested like 20 odd products from the legacy market. And, a bunch of them I don't need to name names, but let's say some big brands, like those are research chemicals, right? They're billing them. And a lot of them will use Amanita on the packaging to indemnify themselves or protect against liability. Because then when something like the diamond shrooms happen, they say, oh, it was just a bad batch of muscimol, even though there's like a dozen other chemicals on them, right? Or whatever they are. So I think this is huge. And this is actually something Hamilton Morris has gotten really into recently. I've got to hang out with him recently in Denver, and they were filming for Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia with Triptomic's lab, who are colleagues and friends of mine. That's what they're doing. It's like, you send them your product, or like if you buy a random product from a smoke shop, and they'll tell you what the active ingredients are in there. And a lot of them, unfortunately, unscrupulously, they'll be like, yeah, this is 4-HOMET, or this is 4-ACOD, which if you're advertising that, I don't see any issue with that. Like, those are compounds.
I don't either.
I'm like, I've tried them both. I'm a fan, but the issue comes when people are deliberately packaging as like, this is magic mushrooms. This is a natural, they're using it as a loophole. So I understand the challenge there, but that's a cool thing that's really starting to come to national attention, is like, okay, you can play the boogeyman and say that the gray market or the legacy market products are all dangerous or whatever. But scientifically, that's not quite accurate, because there are a lot of really ethical producers who treat this like a spiritual mission, not as a business. It's their mission to create safe supply for people and to educate. And that's what I get out of these conferences too. You go and you meet people, you can tell pretty quickly, especially after a full weekend, like, these dudes just out here hustling, trying to trap or whatever. And these people, like, they know what they're doing. They got their COAs. When I went to Denver last time, I've got to go like 4 times this year, in the last year. I went to a bunch of operations where they have their COAs there, like, this is our testing results. This is this strain. This is the potency, take 1 square if you're looking for this. And that's where it's at. Like, I don't think we can wait for federal regulation, because also a lot of them don't know what they're dealing with. And I've been in the room with people involved with regulation from these alphabet agencies. A lot of them don't know what they're dealing with. They're new to this, versus these underground people who can self-regulate. Like, I do think there's like what you're doing, like, there's a degree of self-regulation that comes out with education, community, so on and so forth.
That's it. Yeah. It's regulation through education, really. And it's really tricky with Amanita. And it was Triptomics that gave me this full breakdown of why Amanita is so difficult to test. And I think that the gist of it was muscimol and ibotenic acid are very unstable. They're very small molecules, and they elute before the injection peak. I kind of understand what that means, but I don't necessarily fully grasp it. But from my experience with testing Amanita, like, it's just, and it's still in its infancy stages, I suppose. But like, muscimol and ibotenic acid testing are it's a shot in the dark, and nothing really aligns with what like the research papers say that it should. And so it makes self-regulation much more complicated when you get test results for the same product that are like all over the board from all these different labs. And it's something that we're very focused on, is trying to figure out how to, the whole gas station gummy phenomena, as we call it. Like you said, like, I have no problem with people like 4-ACO DMT, phenomenal molecule. Like, I've enjoyed it many times, and I've always, learned a lot from those experiences and had great times. But when it's marketed as Amanita, or marketed as, proprietary mushroom blend, or whatever it may be, like, it completely detracts from the experience, and it sheds a bad light on psilocybin or on Amanita. And it's a problem. But the self-regulation is something that we've been, very focused on, and trying to develop our methodology for it throughout the past year or two, as this, really with it all came to a head with the diamond shrooms debacle, of course. It's a tricky path to walk for us, just because the testing it's not as good as it is with psilocybin yet, with Amanita. And we'll get there, but it's tricky.
I think that's where anecdotal experiences come in. Like, build a community of harm reduction professionals, people who are going to look out for you and say, okay, I've done it this many. Somebody reached out to me after I was doing some content around Minnesota Nice, and they're a psychonaut, they're got a podcast, and they're journalists and all this. So like, I've always been apprehensive about Amanita, but like, I saw what you're doing, and like, I want to try some now. So I believe they ordered, they told me they were going to. I know other people have. And it's that thing of being like, it's that peer-to-peer sort of validation, where you're like, okay, how did you do it? Because I see what you're doing, and I'm not saying like, go and take 10 grams of Amanita at Coachella for your first time.
Right.
Like, it's not a price at all, right? I'm saying like, yeah, here's what I do. Like take 400 milligrams before sleep, chill, just, and mostly people have a baseline of experience. I think most people are interested in trying these different things and like the African dreaming route, so on and so forth. They usually have a baseline of experience already. And so we need to like share our experiences. That's the whole point of when I kind of came out of the psychedelic closet with Mycopreneur. It was a big leap of faith because it's like, dude, everyone's talking about mushrooms now. This was 2020. I've seen, the Michael Pollan book comes out, Fantastic Fungi comes out. People are starting to share. And I was like, I should share my experiences because it's the pandemic. I'm done teaching high school. I don't want to go back to that. It was, for obvious reasons, hard to share like psychedelic experiences publicly when you're a high school teacher. And but I have a wealth of personal experience, and not just that, like how to integrate this into your life in this Western world, not like I'm going to go move over to the Amazon or go sit in an ashram or whatever. Like I had a lot of experience with having these psychedelic experiences with different DMT, all of them, the whole gamut pretty much, and being able to function in society, albeit being a little bit eccentric, but like, that was sort of always my goal is like, I don't want to turn on, tune in and drop out. I want to like turn on and then like blaze a trail straight forward and figure out a way how to integrate these and make them relevant to the world that I live in and that I exist in. And then, as soon as I did, I remember asking like 12 people when I first launched the podcast, people I knew who were professionals, journalists, therapists, so on, military veteran, who I knew had a relationship with mushrooms. And, right off the bat, probably 6 of them were like, I'm just not comfortable speaking publicly right now. And then 6 of them were like, I've been waiting for someone to ask me to speak publicly about this. And then, once more people share their experience, look how normalized it's become in the last 5 years. We got microdosing moms, we've got like all kinds of people we're all involved with who do this because they feel like they can share their experiences now. And it doesn't have to be kept up tightly as a secret, that you only do at Burning Man or like on the weekends. Like you can speak publicly about it and still be employable. And not that I necessarily want to be, but like still be professional, right? I consider I'm all in with what I'm doing with this platform. And I love doing contract work with people, but it's taken on too much importance for me to be able to allocate resources elsewhere. Like this and my family is like 100% what I want to be doing for as long as possible.
Yeah. Epic. So give us some jokes, man. What are your favorite Amanita jokes? What are your favorite psychedelic jokes? Let's hear them.
Well, I took a microdose. Okay. Anybody else here microdosing? This is for the conference. You're out there. You're like, tell you what, this guy knows what I'm talking about. I think that was more than a microdose, sir. You point at him, always get some, and then I'll come in with like, oh, it's an Amanita microdose for legal clarifications because the drug war forgot to account for the biodiversity of the fungal kingdom, right? Isn't it, ridiculous that we can have one legal magic mushroom, but this magic mushroom over here, that one's illegal. Like who drew the line there? And speaking of that, Amanita, another microdose. And then I take that I'm going to work in the actual product into some of these routines. But what really gets me, Christian, is with all this America First stuff about like, we need to domestically produce everything. We need to onshore everything. Well, we really need to switch up the fact that our drug dealers use the metric system because, that's the only reason I know the metric system at all is from buying weed from my boy Llama behind the 7-Eleven back in the day. And I remember rolling up to him and being like, I love weed. I've had it a few times. I want to buy some. What's a normal amount? He's like, a gram. I was like, what is a gram? I mean, I had a Russian exchange student who I think weighs himself in grams, So like, I don't know what is what. Okay. What if I want slightly more than a gram? He's like, well, you can get an eighth. How many grams in an eighth? 2.5. Like, what? Oh, I don't know the difference. And I figured out about a year later that this dude was skimming me simply because I didn't know the metric system. I go over to Amsterdam and I order an ounce. They give me 28 grams. They're like, you gave me 3 grams too many. They're like, no, your dealer's just been skimming you, bro. So, yes, we'll check. I don't want to be doing communist calculations when I'm trying to get high. Like, we need something that speaks to the American populace. We got to get our drug dealers off the metric system. That's a bit I've done and kind of riff on that a little bit. Yeah, I love talking. Let's see, any one-liners? I think it's great people are interested in mushrooms because as a society, we've lost our moral compass. Moral mushroom. That's a dad joke. I'm a dad, so I got
for sure
dad jokes right there. Well, the drug war, that's a big one. I want to talk about the drug war quite a bit because, it was launched in 1971 with Richard Nixon to try to demonize people who use drugs. And now all of a sudden, the military's investing in psychedelics, and it gives a whole new perspective to the term drug war. It's like, no. We're not fighting against drugs. We're fighting on drugs now. Yeah. Oh, see, Wilson over there in the foxhole needs your help. Go hook him up. Hook him up with some ketamine. Because, ketamine was used as a field anesthetic in the Vietnam War, actually, is where it comes from. Why do people do that, right? So it's like, now the dude, he's in a foxhole, but also in a K-hole, The funny thing about ketamine, there's lots of routes of administration. If you boost ketamine, you enter the K-hole through the A-hole. Reggie Watts like that one. Is like, we should make a shirt that's so stop, And then the whole enhanced games. This is a bit I've been talking about. This is a true story. There's a couple billionaires, Peter Thiel and Christian Angermeyer, both heavily invested in psychedelics, who are launching this new league called the Enhanced Games, where the athletes take drugs, and it's the anti-Olympics. And their whole perspective is that we want to see how far we can push the human body. Why are we outlawing doping when it's creating enhanced athletic performance? And of course, this is a controversial, kind of progressive by some standards, new league. But really, Christian, I've been doing that forever. A league you can take drugs called high school baseball. You ever done ketamine on second base? It's amazing, dude. You're sitting there, close to the action. So the thing about the enhanced games, though, is they've got all these people trying all these different molecules. They want to give them steroids. They want to give them research chemicals. Well, that's kind of boring to me, man. Like, I want to see people like inject themselves with ketamine and try to run the bases. That's way more interesting to me. Just like first baseman's having an ego death. The other guy's like hugging on, he's got a family in the K-hole and he's raising them on second base. Like, there's so many different possible combinations of like what drugs would be cool with what sports. So like, I try to think of a few. So like, well, meth in NASCAR is already a thing, so we can cross that.
For sure.
I think like meth hockey would be cool. They're like hockey players already missing a bunch of teeth. They're already playing on ice. Just throw a little more ice on top. I think meth hockey, I'd be sitting in the front row with season tickets for that one. Ketamine football could be pretty cool. So, but really with the enhanced games, I wonder about the concession stands, because like the players on the field have access to substances. What do the fans have access to? It's not just performance enhancing drugs. We want drug enhancing performances. All right, there you go. There's I'm a lot of it is playing to the crowd. Like I've learned from doing comedy live. I talked to Shane Moss about this, and I was like, dude, Shane, I've seen you live a few times. You talk like so slow, man. It's part of your whole routine. I get up there and it's like, boom, boom, boom. Like I talk fast, I get excited. So that's something like when I was in Texas, I was like, okay, I hit with that joke. I need to just pause for a little bit and let the audience have it, Yeah. So I tell a lot of stories too in my routines, because I've got a lot of funny stories from, using substances all over the world. Like I like to talk about Berghain Club, really infamous club in Berlin, where people are taking polypharmacy of novel substances. Like these guys in Berlin, they do the fuck out of some drugs. Hopefully I can drop the F-bomb. Apologies.
Yeah, you're good.
You're 18. I have to click over 21 when I get on the Minnesota Nice website. So I just podcast admission bit. So yeah, like these guys really do some substances. And I was over there in Berlin and at Berghain Club. I'll spare you this one, actually. That's a little bit pushing it. But I will say that when I went to Copenhagen with a couple of my friends, and I love Bicycle Day so much, I celebrate it 8 to 10 times a year, not just on April 19th, which is the traditional bicycle day, but I'll ride a bicycle all over the world. Mexico City, Copenhagen. You put me in New York City and, with a good plug, and we're going to have a Bicycle Day celebration. So I shit you not. We're over there. We're cycling through, and I'm like, this has been so great. They're like, my German friend's like, we are just beginning, my friend. I was like, we've been, riding a bicycle on LSD for like 10 hours. It's like, we are just beginning. We have 48 more hours planned for this trip.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. It was like, and now we will introduce some mushrooms. I was like, all right, well, I'm feeling pretty good from all this. We're at the Tivoli Gardens, beautiful, 150-year-old amusement park. Great. I'll go for it. Within 20 minutes of eating the mushrooms, haven't even started yawning or giggling yet. My buddy Sebastian comes out. He's like, no, shall we do some cocaine? And I'm like, I don't know, man. You guys are on another level. I'm all for the responsible mainstreaming of drugs. It's definitely wise to recognize there are people who do this professionally, though. And it seems like Berlin is a big part of that. So, I'll go into those stories. And, I share the story about how, funny one for this one, we're sharing this little hotel room in Copenhagen there. And there's 3 of us in this room. There's like 3 beds. And I come back in the room, after this wonderful bike ride and all that, and Sebastian is just completely naked. And I'm just like, oh, my bad, dude. Sorry. I turn around. He's like, I'm offended. I'm offended. Us German boys, we're so comfortable together. It's so strange in America to have this heteronormative mindset that limits you from seeing other people as they are in full nakedness. Mind you, he's like been brainwashing me with a week of Berlin clubs and, not a lot of sleep, all that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to lean into this experience. I just stand there. It's like, what do I do now? What do I look? Do I look at his eyes? Do I look at his dong? Do I look over to the sun? I don't know. And he's standing there. He starts telling, he's like, my grandfather, he lived to 111. Yeah, and his secret, Vaseline. He would apply Vaseline over his entire surface area of his skin. Still working on my German accent, And then, may I apply some Vaseline to you? I was like, nah, bro. You know what? I'm like just getting comfortable with the fact that you're naked in the room. And like, this is very new for me, this kind of thing. I'm not European. We don't do this where I come from. And he's like, yes, but it's like, we are brothers now. We're brothers. We've been in Bergheim Club. We've been, I've driven you together. May I apply some Vaseline? I was like about to do it. And I was like, time to exit. Let's go. And you know what? Let's put a pin in this one. I go down to the lobby of the hotel and our other buddies there. I was like, dude, I just had this kind of strange experience with Sebastian. He's like, oh, did he try to apply Vaseline to you? I was like, it's like, oh, he does this with every foreigner. I'm like, yeah, but like, okay, well, you told me it's like completely natural for like German boys to be naked in a room together. No, this is the gayest shit I've ever heard. It's completely unnatural. We don't do this at all. So, that's kind of how I approach this, is tell stories, lots of other ones, still working on my routine. And usually I'll have like my phone just with some bullet points. I don't read off the phone or anything, but in case you get on a lot, as we're prone to do, a train of thought takes you somewhere, then I'm like, I should circle back and finish up. And speaking of finishing up, I hear my little boy crying, and I'm sure his mom would like me to go attend to him so she can get some good work.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much. This has been so fun. You're such a great person, and I'm so grateful that we're able to work together in the capacity that we have. And yeah, I want to keep it all going. So we appreciate you infinitely. And yeah, thank you, brother.
Well, thank you so much, Christian, and shout out to the whole team. And I want to build with you. So, I see this as a collaborative enterprise, and I'm happy to extend all of my gifts and opportunities anywhere we go. I want to go together. Like, I love building together. I do the incubators every Thursday. I'll shout that out. Every Thursday, I host a Mycopreneur incubator. It's online. We've got people from all over the world come, cross-pollinate, talk shop. We have a lot of really established people who will pop in and share intel for how they scaled their companies, things like that. We've got newbies coming in. We've got lawyers, journalists, you name it. You never know who's going to show up. So that's every Thursday. The link's in my newsletter. And just hit me up. If you're hearing this, you're like, oh, cool, let's connect. Or I'm so happy to keep building, keep expanding the network. So thank you again for having me on and for the support and collaboration, Christian.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate you, brother.
Peace.
Have a good one, man.
Thank you for listening to the Amanita Effect podcast. Please like us, share, subscribe, and get in touch